Okay, so every gear purchase I try and justify that it'll make my work easier or I'll use it at least more than 5 times. But a lot of times there's just some purchases that just don't work out. All right, first up is the Insta360 X4. I've always thought 360 cameras are super gimmicky and kind of cheesy looking in the footage that they output, but I also found out that they're kind of tricky to work with. Ultimately, the product is fine and the app and software is actually quite impressive. But when you've been spoiled by footage from your cinema camera, footage from the DJI Osmo Pocket, or even your cell phone, the footage from the 360 camera can seem a little bit lacking unless you're out in the bright sunlight. So even if you had the perfect conditions and you've gotten your shot, then comes the post-production process. So what ends up being a 5-second shot actually took you more than 30 minutes to set up because you need to keyframe everything and change the perspective, and you need to do a bit of noise reduction afterwards because even in the brightest sunlights, it can look a little bit grainy after it's been zoomed in. So it can be a really big disappointment from your flow state of when you're editing footage that you work so hard just to get footage that's kind of fuzzy in the end and you aren't really able to color grade too much. Ultimately, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 really ate the Insta360's lunch when it came to having a portable camera that you could get a little cool shot with and was much more flexible in post. All right, next is a piece of software that I've been waiting for a long time, which is the Amaran desktop app. I generally record these talking head segments of my videos in one of 2 places, my little set here or at my home office desk. Because I've been incorporating a teleprompter into some of my projects, the Amaran desktop app finally gave me the last tool I needed for controlling the overall production from my laptop. Now, one thing I have to clarify is that this has been my experience as a Mac OS user. I've never used the Windows version of the desktop app, and the phone app, the iPad app work perfectly as always. But the Amaran desktop experience has been rough. I can only get my lights to connect and work when I first set them up in the app. Every time I relaunch the app or try a new project, I either need to completely re-add all my lights again or I need to completely reinstall the app completely. And on the last update of the app just got completely stuck in an endless boot loop. Now, I could understand that this is a problem because I use probably a lot more lights than what is the target Amaran desktop app user, and I am using a combination of Amaran and aperture lights, and this app is targeted for the Amaran series of lights. But I am kind of hopeful as well because I do see that there's constant updates to the app, and hopefully it's at a point where it's very stable in the future. But in the meantime, I'll stick to using the Situs Link app on the iPad or on my phone because that app has always been extremely stable for me. Okay, I've generally known to stay away from the first-party Sony camera apps, but this one had a long requested feature for Sony camera apps, which was an official implementation of false color on cameras like the FX3, the FX6, and the FX30. But of course, like many Sony cameras and Sony apps, the UX and UI experience is not really well thought out, or it's only thought out for very specific users. So first up, connecting to it is a chore because it can vary between the different camera models. And don't even think about going in and out of the app or letting your phone screen dim because you'll immediately lose connection to the camera and then you have to reconnect all over again. Really, I found the only way to keep the app stable between various cameras is you need to connect the cameras to some type of portable Wi-Fi router or just to your home network because doing it through Bluetooth or any other connection system is just way too painful. When they're all on Wi-Fi and the app and the device are all on the same Wi-Fi network, it actually is a pretty seamless experience. And then once you're actually in the app, you got to deal with the classic Sony menus, which means things are hidden very deep in the app or in places where you don't expect them or they aren't where they should be. For example, one of the really weirdest things is how to properly set your exposure tools. So even as something as simple as false color, which you think you should be able to turn on, be able to quickly see where the exposure is and feel confident in that, you have to be careful because if you have any type of LUT on in your camera, like your preview LUT that you would on your screen, that also reflects on the app. And by default, it's set to SDR. So in a sense, you could trust this, but what if you have a very special LUT or you're not using the standard, S709 LUT? If you're using a different LUT, then you're not really going to get super accurate false color readings. What you actually need to do is you need to enable S-Log3, and then you need to actually disable the LUT in your camera as well. You can control this all in the app, but you need to make sure you're doing this when you're trying to get your exposure. Not a big deal if you're just kind of moving around quickly, but it's something that you could easily forget when you're setting up on set, especially if you're by yourself. Having said that, maybe it's because I'm just trying to delude myself to thinking I spent my money wisely, but the vast majority of products that I purchased last year have been pretty useful and probably most importantly fun to use over the past year. The YouTube Sphere has done well for my hobby, even though it's been a bit catastrophic for my saving goals. Anywho, let me know if you encountered these problems and also had painful experiences, or maybe you think I should go back into the YouTube vortex, watch more tutorials, feed the algorithm, buy more stuff. I don't know. Let me know. Catch you next time.